RiseAbsorb is redefining what growers expect from phosphate fertilizer. Backed by data and built for performance, RiseAbsorb helps reduce phosphorus losses, improve uptake, and boost ROI without increasing input costs. Join the next wave of growers switching to the next generation of phosphorus fertilizers by visiting phospholutions.com.
All right, I'm Lindsay Smith with Real Agriculture and Real Ag Radio. Joining me now, it's Tyler Fulton. He's the president of the Canadian Cattle Association, based out of Birtle, Manitoba. Tyler, you've been busy, so good to see you home.
Yes, it's great to be home. It was about a 10-day multi-capital trip for me. So lots to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so we'll start maybe where we don't usually talk about, but we'll start with the UK. CCA had a release that went out this week asking for the government to take some action. Catch us up. What is this about? Because this sort of has dropped off our radar, to be honest.
Yeah. So earlier this week, the government put forward legislation that would permit or confirm the UK accession into the CPTPP agreement. And we've long kind of opposed that approach, but really there's nothing that we can do about it now. It's already been confirmed by several other countries, and so that cow has already left the barn, so to speak. So what we're advocating for is actually a termination of what we call the continuity agreement with the UK, and that we believe if the government were to terminate that bilateral agreement, it would give us leverage to really address the non-tariff barriers that remain to access that market. Just to confirm, the 2024 numbers had UK exports to Canada at around 42 million in beef, and Canada exported zero to the UK. So quite simply, there's not meaningful access here, and the trade is not reciprocal.
So why not? There are particular sticking points that the Canadian cattle industry has brought up many times, and I think has been at issue for a while. What is it that the UK is saying Canada doesn't meet in order to actually bring in Canadian beef?
Yes, so there's two main issues. The UK doesn't recognize our meat hygiene systems. We were looking for a full systems approval in the way that it was previously established in the CPTPP. We're concerned about the precedent that it sets in the agreement. It's been a very effective, successful, progressive agreement for the beef industry previous to the UK's admission, and so that's a critical part. The other portion is the use of growth promotants and hormones. We know that is really effective at improving efficiency, and there's not a science rationale behind why they wouldn't permit it. So those are the two main issues that are long-standing, and ideally we need to get resolved if we're going to have meaningful access.
And is it the CCA's view that potentially terminating this continuity agreement at least would sort of, is it a bargaining chip, or is it to essentially say, like, listen, UK, this isn't a two-way relationship and therefore it's over?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of both. I think there's not the incentive for the UK to negotiate, in good faith when when we have this continuity agreement in place. And so I think we can maybe, consider using that as leverage. But the other consideration is just to really focus on science and rules-based trade. I think that those principles have served the industry extremely well, and especially in this, uncertain geopolitical environment, we need to, focus on those key principles so that we can diversify our markets effectively.
All right. Well, since you brought it up, I will ask you about that. We'll end with the meetings you had with Mexico, and so we'll end on a high note, I think. But we certainly, have seen from U.S. President Donald Trump and his Ag Secretary Rollins a lot of language, and in fact, on Wednesday we saw a white paper that sort of outlined what the U.S. plans to do. But and there seems to be a bit of a disconnect between, the actual changes that the U.S. government is putting forward and a bit of the, promotion or rhetoric of this. But I mean, the U.S. president came out and essentially said, beef prices are too high and we've got to fix them. And understandably, the pushback from, producers was quite strong for good reason. But from a trade perspective, from a trade partner perspective, where does the Canadian beef industry sort of sit when we see, rumblings like this south of the border?
Well, we're extremely aligned with our U.S. counterparts. As a matter of fact, I was in Washington earlier this week while a lot of this developed, and we met with our counterparts and CBA, and share exactly the same perspective. Science based and rules based trade. And so when there's considerations, I guess, for interfering with functioning markets, we really grow concerned over that. Quite simply, the demand for beef has been exceptionally good. The supply is tight because we've had some droughts and some older demographics, but quite simply, there's never been a better incentive to grow than what we've got right now. This is exactly the way that that a market is supposed to function, and we have what's the main issue, I think, is just a lack of understanding as to the long timeline that goes with market signals in the cattle industry. It's a long cycle.
Yeah. And that, I think, and certainly we heard it exactly that from your counterparts at NCBA as well, that, the cattle industry, the supply chain is much more complicated than just the price at the grocery store. There's, the size of the cow herd and cattle movements and the integration between Canada and the U.S. and of course also Mexico, which sort of brings this in, which that right now, that border is closed to movement of live cattle into the U.S. So it is certainly interesting to see, I think, from a political perspective, this idea of this interference in a market that can function. We'll switch gears a little bit, though, because it does sort of bring in Mexico. That is, as you alluded to at the beginning of this conversation, one of the places you were in this last loop across North America. And some really good news, I think, for the beef side. Beef figured quite prominently in a lot of the press releases and the discussions that came out of those Mexico meetings. So from your perspective, what did you experience? What meetings did you have? And what is the outlook with trade with Mexico?
Yeah, it's excellent. Really, there was two different events that I was there for. I was on, part of the trade mission with the ag minister in Mexico City, where we had a roundtable event, a reception, and also an announcement at Mexico's Costco. Canadian beef from JBS has moved into Costco and in Mexico, and it's had a phenomenal response from consumers there. So they were effusive about how things were going there, and it's just really a testament to the quality and the value proposition that there is there. So really great news there. The other Mexican kind of meeting that I was at was one that included four provincial ag ministers, as well as state level ag secretaries, both in Mexico and Canada, and that there was really unanimity about the desire to maintain CUSMA or USMCA as it currently is for agriculture. There's a couple of irritants, but overall it's served agriculture extremely well, and we need to maintain that in order to continue to drive growth.
So it's a bit of that meeting that you were at, as you pointed out, it is interesting because it does include quite prominently the state level agriculture, as well as, of course, our provincial ministers. How does it change the dynamic a little bit? Because you, of course, will sit at these tables with the federal side, and then this is the state provincial side. How do those conversations differ? Is everyone really on the same page, or are there differences between the two groups?
Oh no, you get a lot more nuanced conversations, just with what the sector of agriculture that's critical. I would reference, the Secretary of Ag for Arizona has a different focus generally than what the Secretary of Agriculture has for Kansas, and but what was really kind of remarkable is that as much as their focus was different, there was just a very consistent message, and it didn't matter even if you were from state to state or province to country to country. There was just a very consistent message that said this has been a very effective agreement for all three countries, and that we need to maintain it in its current form.
Okay. So we'll see what happens. This is, of course, sort of the lead up to that review happening in July. So,
Yeah.
important, I would imagine, from the perspective of having everyone on side saying that this is what they want. We'll see if that is heard at the federal level. That'll be the important part on the U.S. side. All right, Tyler, thank you so much for joining me here on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, no problem.